Chicago, September to October 1982. Extra-strength Tylenol capsules were an everyday household staple when 7 otherwise unrelated people in the Chicago metropolitan area died after ingesting cyanide-laced capsules. The first death, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman of Elk Grove Village, occurred on September 29, 1982. In the days that followed, other victims across Cook County and the suburbs collapsed and died, bringing the toll to 7 by early October. Families, the Kellermans among them, confronted sudden brutal grief, loved ones convulsing, gasping and slipping away as potassium cyanide stopped hearts and flooded lungs, leaving shock and a horrifying search for answers. The murders shattered public trust in Johnson & Johnson, whose Tylenol brand was a household name, and forced James E. Burke, J&J's chairman and CEO, into crisis leadership as the company coordinated a nationwide response in early October 1982. At that time, over-the-counter medicines commonly lacked tamper-evident protections. Capsules sold in glass and plastic bottles showed no obvious sign if someone had slipped poison inside. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Chicago Police Department opened investigations while store shelves emptied and cities filled with warning notices. Local coroners confirmed cyanide poisoning and headlines focused on grisly detail. This was not an isolated horror, but a public vulnerability. 7 poisoned strangers, desperate families, a storied company on the defensive, and an unprotected drug supply that would force immediate change. Within days, the pattern hardened from tragic coincidence into a deliberate, murderous design. After 12-year-old Mary Kellerman collapsed and died on September 29, 1982, other otherwise healthy people across the Chicago metropolitan area began collapsing with the same sudden violent symptoms: seizures, loss of consciousness, and rapid respiratory failure. Families were frantic and coroners were baffled. Local emergency rooms and Cook County morgues logged a cluster of unexplained deaths. Bodies arrived with no obvious external injury, but with the same invisible toxin at work. Forensic chemists moved in under tight deadlines. Toxicology reports from county laboratories and federal analysts identified potassium cyanide in victims' blood and stomach contents, and crucially, in fragments of gelatin from extra-strength Tylenol capsules recovered at or near the scenes. The discovery of potassium cyanide, an industrial-strength poison that halts cellular respiration in seconds, transformed scattered tragedies into a single, horrific pattern. Someone had laced a commercially sold pain reliever with a lethal dose. Investigators found that the gel capsules could be opened and their contents tampered with without obvious disturbance to the outer bottle. A familiar kitchen cabinet had become an incubator of death. Newsrooms seized the image of ordinary medicine turned homicidal, and the Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, and national networks splashed cyanide and Tylenol across front pages and evening broadcasts, magnifying public panic. Store shelves emptied as shoppers dumped bottles on counters and fled. Pharmacies closed sections of over-the-counter aisles, and parents checked their own medicine cabinets. Subscribe. Apparently, panic goes viral. The Chicago Police Department, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and the FBI converged, exchanging fragments, tests, leads, and photographs in a race to link bottles, purchase locations, and possible suspects. Every confirmed chemical result tightened the noose of suspicion around product tampering and pushed the story from local horror toward a national crisis, forcing corporations, regulators, and investigators to prepare a response that had to be swift and decisive. Detectives from the Chicago Police Department, agents from the FBI, and investigators from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration moved with grim focus from morgues to grocery aisles. They traced purchases, cataloged bottles, and photographed fragments of gelatin as if every supermarket shelf were a crime scene. Investigators tracked lot numbers, interviewed pharmacists and customers in Elk Grove Village and other Cook County suburbs, and tested unopened and opened bottles recovered from victims' homes and store shelves. Federal labs used gas chromatography and mass spectrometry to search for minute traces of potassium cyanide. Each positive test widened the map of danger. These killings were no longer isolated tragedies, but a campaign of contamination that could reach anyone buying ordinary pain relief. On October 1st, 2082, an anonymous extortion letter arrived at Johnson & Johnson's offices demanding $1 million and claiming responsibility for the poisonings. It read like a cold pact. Pay up, and the deaths would stop. The letter taunted investigators and hinted at control. A man later tied to that correspondence, James William Lewis, appeared in records. The letter produced no definitive perpetrator and only deepened the mystery and outrage. Panic metastasized into copycat threats and hoaxes that clogged police switchboards. Thousands of calls reported suspicious capsules. Pharmacies received threats and bogus warnings. Some stores closed entire over-the-counter aisles. Retailers scrambled to post handwritten notices and to quarantine stock while consumers dumped bottles on counters and rifled through medicine cabinets in terror. Regulators demanded immediate action. Municipal officials demanded answers, and Johnson & Johnson faced a firestorm of questions that moved faster than forensic timelines. Pressure came from grieving families, frantic shoppers, and headline desks fed by grisly autopsy details. Every unconfirmed tip and every new suspect lead amplified the urgency. The investigation ballooned into a chaotic hunt across laboratories, phone banks, and retail logs. It drove investigators toward a dramatic corporate and regulatory decision that would change how Americans bought medicine. As investigators widened their net, Johnson & Johnson shifted from crisis management to decisive action. On October 5, 1982, James E. Burke, J&J's chairman and CEO, ordered an unprecedented nationwide recall of Tylenol capsules and halted production and advertising of capsule products. The move stunned industry observers and regulators. The recall removed roughly 31 million bottles from store shelves and home cabinets, and the company publicly estimated losses topping $100 million. But Burke put consumer safety ahead of short-term profit. The logistical operation that followed was immediate and brutal. Trucks and courier vans raced to pharmacies and supermarkets to retrieve sealed cases. Store managers stapled quarantine notices to empty shelves, and clerks stacked returned bottles in cardboard prisons bound for forensic labs. Call centers flooded with frantic callers reporting suspicious pills and seeking refunds, and grocery aisles that once held rows of white bottles stood gaping and barren. Law enforcement intensified the hunt as if the entire nation were a crime scene. The Chicago Police Department, the FBI, and the FDA expanded fingerprint and trace evidence searches to retail backrooms, dumpsters, and distribution centers, cataloging lot numbers and photographing every bottle cap and gelatin fragment with grim, clinical attention. Forensic teams sped up gas chromatography and mass spectrometry runs, while detectives combed surveillance tapes, credit card records, and supplier manifests for any pattern or motive. Every confirmed positive test for potassium cyanide became both a lead and a headline, and every anonymous tip demanded immediate verification to prevent further harm. Retail tracebacks and telephone threats multiplied the workload. Retailers quarantined countless cases and blocked sales of capsule forms nationwide. The recall bought time and focus, but raised the stakes. An industry giant had publicly acknowledged that a common analgesic could be weaponized, and the hunt for a killer had shifted from local tragedy to national obsession. The landscape was left stripped bare, with empty pharmacy shelves, quarantined evidence, and an intensified, gruesome search for who had turned simple pain relief into a silent instrument of death. When James E. Burke ordered a recall and public safety campaign on October 5, 1982, the response was immediate and practical. Roughly 31 million bottles were pulled from shelves. Radio and television warnings told Americans to discard capsules. Pharmacies quarantined stock, and Johnson & Johnson set up refund and information hotlines to calm a terrified public. That decisive action removed the immediate instrument of the violence and bought time for frantic forensics. But it could not mend lives ripped apart by cyanide's sudden, convulsive kill. The criminal thread produced one high-profile legal outcome. An anonymous extortion letter sent on October 1, 1982 pointed investigators to a suspect, and James William Lewis was later arrested and, in 1986, convicted for the extortion tied to the Tylenol case. Lewis's prosecution answered the taunt in the letter but did not deliver justice for the poisoned victims. Despite exhaustive work by the Chicago Police Department, the FBI, and the FDA, tracebacks, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and nationwide interviews, no one was ever charged or convicted for the cyanide murders themselves. The Tylenol poisonings remain officially unsolved. Families such as the Kellermans faced a terrible duality: gratitude that corporate action likely prevented further grotesque deaths, and raw, unresolved grief, because the person or persons who turned ordinary capsules into lethal traps were never held legally accountable. That unresolved moral and legal ambiguity closed one chapter and pushed the crisis toward lasting reform and deeper public distrust. The grisly October 1982 Tylenol poisonings triggered swift, concrete reforms that rewired consumer safety. In the months after the crisis, manufacturers adopted tamper-evident packaging: sealed, glued boxes, plastic neckbands, foil inner seals, and unit-dose blister packs. Johnson & Johnson, led by then-CEO James E. Burke, ordered a recall on October 5, 1982, and other companies followed suit. Regulators moved as well. Congress passed federal anti-tampering legislation in 1983, making product tampering a federal crime, and the Food and Drug Administration established tamper-evident standards for over-the-counter medicines. Retail practice and product design shifted toward visible barriers and lot-level traceability, and corporations rewrote crisis playbooks, treating consumer safety as existential. Public trust, frayed by the convulsive silent deaths in Chicago, never fully healed. Shoppers learned to check seals, and companies learned to communicate quickly and transparently. The Tylenol poisonings reconfigured law, product design, and crisis management, an ugly but enduring lesson. Safety systems can blunt but not erase the damage caused by anonymous malice.